Snow clawed at her skin like knives, tearing through every promise she thought would keep her warm. In her arms, the baby's breath rose like ghostly steam, the only warmth left. She whispered through cracked lips, "You will live even if I do not." Her vision flickered, stars and snow merging into white. Then, boots crunch the frost. A shadow looms, tall and silent, hat low, rifle strapped to a battered coat. He kneels, scarred hands testing for life. No words. She shudders as he rasps, "Don't you dare give up now." He lifts them. When the wind dies, they'll face what haunts that silence. Clara Vance never planned to end up in a place like the Thorn Camp, but Silas Thorne had a way of speaking that made every lie sound like a promise carved in gold. He told her he'd found a hidden vein in the hills, enough to buy out her old debts back east. He told her the snow here was kinder, the air purer, the people loyal like kin. He told her she wouldn't have to look over her shoulder again. So she came. She came with just a bag of clothes and a baby growing under her ribs, believing him when he said he'd marry her come spring. She believed him when he said no one would ever lay a hand on her again. But by the time the baby came, little Reed with his big eyes and that stubborn breath that refused to fade, Clara saw the rot. She saw how the gold made men kill each other for boots, for scraps, for the chance to crawl home with pockets lined in blood. She saw how Silas watched it all, cigarette burning low, eyes sharp and small behind the frost. "You're either useful or you're gone, Clara," he told her once when she asked for more bread for the new mothers. "Gold feeds the loyal. The rest can chew snow." Still, Clara couldn't stop caring. She taught the other camp women how to ration stale bread, how to sneak salted jerky into the hems of their skirts. She showed them where the boys dumped half-rotten potatoes behind the supply shed, taught them to dry what they could over the tiny fire behind the sleeping tents. Some nights they whispered about running south when the snow broke, carrying their kids on their backs through the pass. Clara made them swear not to say a word. Hope was dangerous here. Hope was as loud as a gunshot. Then Silas found out. Not about Clara, not yet. He caught Maeve, the youngest, slipping dry bread under her baby's blanket. Clara was close enough to see the fury that twisted Silas's grin. He dragged Maeve by her hair out into the clearing, made the others watch. He didn't raise a hand himself. Silas didn't get his boots bloody. He let two of his men do it instead. Maeve's screams didn't last long, but the lesson did. Trust cost you your teeth, and in the Thorn Camp, your children paid the rest. Clara stood frozen behind the stacked crates, Reed strapped to her chest. She couldn't make a sound, couldn't let herself be next. She kept telling herself she'd do better. She'd keep these women alive, no matter how small the chance. But that night she sang to Reed in the dark, her voice shaking. "You will live, even if I do not." Around the same time, a rumor crept through the camp like a snake under the snow. Merritt Kane had come drifting in from the Dakota line, a bounty hunter too fond of bribes and whiskey. Some said Silas paid him extra to keep tabs on the women, to sniff out anyone planning to run. Some said Merritt was the one who tipped Silas about Maeve's stolen bread. When Clara caught his eyes across the fire pit, he just smiled that crooked smile, flicked his coin into the flames. No words, but a warning all the same. Clara kept her head down after that. She stitched extra pockets into her skirts. She slept with Reed tucked tight against her ribs. She told herself spring would come and she'd find the road south. But the wind bit through the tents and Silas's laughter echoed off the frozen walls of her mind. The gold was a lie. The camp was a cage. And hope was a secret she had to bury deep in her chest, like a spark under snow. Calder Ash still dreamed of the piano sometimes. In his sleep, the old upright his mother used to play would come alive again, the notes drifting through their tiny frontier cabin like warm smoke. His mother's hands were never still. Her fingers were thin, calloused at the tips, stained sometimes with soot from the hearth. But when they touched the keys, they made something holy. She told him once, her voice soft over the steady hammer of the winter wind. "Music heals what bullets break," Calder. "Remember that when the world tries to make you cruel." But the world did make him cruel. Or maybe it just didn't give him another choice. Calder was 15 the first time he pulled a trigger. They were hauling west with nothing but her sheet music stuffed into a battered satchel in a half-broken wagon. Bandits came at dusk, 3 of them, mean-eyed and half-drunk, demanding food, the blankets, her wedding ring. When she told them no, they laughed and grabbed her anyway. Calder still remembered the way the gun felt in his hands. Too heavy, too cold. The kick of the shot cracked his wrist but dropped the first man in the dirt. The second ran, the third didn't. Calder shot him too. Afterward, his mother sat on the wagon tongue, dress torn at the hem, blood on her cheek, and looked at him like she didn't recognize him. She never touched the piano again. After she died, pneumonia took her before the gold did. Calder drifted like the snow that buried her grave. He tried ranch work, guard work, driving wagons through mountain passes. But his hands, once made for keys, turned to iron and lead. He became a name on other men's lips. Calder Ash, the bounty man, the one who'd drag you back across the prairie in chains if the money was good enough. He told himself it was better this way, cleaner than the bandits, less chance of starving. The old music inside him dulled like a blade left out in the rain. But some ghosts don't fade so easy. Years back, he'd been hired to run down a man and his wife. Debt they could never pay. A baby swaddled on the woman's hip. Calder cornered them by an old creek bed. The man begged, offered the last of his silver. The woman didn't plead. She just held her child closer and glared like a mother bear ready to break her teeth on his bones. Calder looked at her, then at the baby's tiny fist clinging to her collar. In the end, he pointed them south, pressed the silver back into the man's shaking palm, and told them to run until the snow swallowed their tracks. He rode the other way, fired his pistol in the air, brought back an empty satchel, and said the river took them. The lie cost him half his pay and all his sleep. Did they survive that winter? He never knew. Some nights he was sure they hadn't. So when Calder found Clara Vance half buried in a drift, her lips blue and her baby breathing shallow against her chest, something old and broken in him split clean open. He knelt beside her, snow melting on his gloves. He could have turned away, said she was already dead, saved himself the risk, the hunger, the ghosts. But her eyes fluttered open just enough to meet his, and he saw the same bear's glare, the same iron in a woman who had nothing left to lose except a child's heartbeat. The weight of it struck him like a bullet. "You will live, even if I do not." He heard her whisper it. He'd heard it once, by a creek bed in another life. He told himself it didn't matter. He'd just carry her to the fire, feed her until she could stand. Then she'd leave, and he'd stay the ghost the mountains had made him. But deep down, Calder Ash knew the truth. The world had stolen his song, but it hadn't killed it. And this woman, this child, maybe they were the last chords left in him worth playing. The cabin was never meant to hold 3 souls, but for a time it did. In the first few days, Clara drifted in and out of sleep by the hearth, drifting between fever dreams and the steady rhythm of Reed's tiny breaths. Calder Ash said little. He moved like a shadow from firewood pile to water pot, melting snow and tending the wound in his shoulder without a word. He made no move to chase her off, but neither did he offer comfort. In this place, warmth was earned by small acts done without promise. When Clara's strength returned, she made herself useful. She scrubbed the soot-ringed kettle and hung fresh water by the stove. She found old tallow candles and melted them down, pouring the wax into tin lids she lined with scraps of cloth. She sewed patches over the worst tears in Calder's long coat, the stitches neat and careful, the way her mother had once taught her. Sometimes she caught Calder watching her hands move, as if he still didn't know what to make of them. Hands that had once clutched a baby to her chest in a blizzard, but could now mend torn seams like nothing had ever broken. In return, Calder carved. He took a splinter of cedar from his woodpile and, by the glow of the fire, whittled it down to a tiny horse with rough edges and crooked legs. When Clara found it by Reed's cradle, she felt something warm press into her ribs, the sort of gratitude that spoke loudest when it stayed silent. Nights were the strangest. Reed would fuss against her breast, then settle, soft breaths filling the cabin like lullabies she hadn't sung yet. Clara started humming again, the same song she'd whispered into the snow the night she fled Silas Thorne's camp. Calder sat in his chair near the stove, boots propped by the dying embers, eyes half closed. Some nights she wondered if he even slept. But then she'd hear him murmur the baby's name under his breath, like a prayer he didn't believe in, but needed to say anyway. One afternoon, Clara found him standing by the old upright piano in the corner. Its keys were dull, chipped from years of cold. Calder's rough fingers hovered above the middle octave. For a moment, he pressed down. A single note rang out, haunting the small room. Another, softer this time. Then his hands trembled. He slammed the lid down with a crack that made Reed startle awake. Clara didn't say a word. She only crossed the room and laid a hand on the old wood. There were things you couldn't ask a man to give if they'd been stolen long ago. Instead, she taught him words, simple baby words. Ma, she'd say, tapping Reed's palm. Pa. Calder tried to echo them, his voice gravel rough from years of whiskey and silence. Pa. It came out low, awkward, but there was a hint of wonder there too, like he was testing if his tongue could shape something gentle. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the cradle. No promises passed between them, just the steady truth that in a cabin this small, warmth was not just fire in the stove. It was the quiet hush of a lullaby, the carved shape of a horse, a torn coat stitched by borrowed candlelight. It was a man's hands remembering they once played music, and a woman's voice reminding him there might still be a song left to find. The first time Clara saw the man, he was just a shadow leaning against a pine at the edge of the clearing. The snow hadn't fallen in days, but the trees still groaned under its weight. The stranger stood there half hidden, a shape that didn't belong to the hush of the forest. She felt him before she truly saw him. That cold prickle at the back of her neck, the same way she'd felt Silas Thorne's eyes watching her every move. His name was Merritt Kane. Clara didn't know that yet, but Calder did. He saw the tracks first, boots too deep and deliberate to belong to a passing trapper. Then he smelled the cheap whiskey lingering where the man had sat by Calder's old fire pit, like an insult left behind in the ashes. Merritt Kane was a bounty hunter by trade, driftwood by nature. He didn't care who paid him, so long as the money was good and the snow didn't bury him before spring. Silas had put a price on Clara's head, Calder figured. Loose ends had a way of haunting greedy men. Now Merritt was here, sniffing around like a wolf who'd caught the scent of blood and gold all at once. He didn't come closer at first. He just lingered in the shadows, flashing Clara a grin that showed too many teeth. When Calder went out to split wood, Merritt called from the tree line, voice smooth and slick. "You're living with a ghost, lady. Man's got more blood on his hands than there is snow in these woods." Clara kept Reed pressed tight to her chest, said nothing. She told herself the silence might keep them alive. Inside, Calder's mind ran circles around the same question. Kill Merritt first, or let him walk away? He was tired of the blood, tired of the ghosts. But men like Merritt were snakes. You turn your back and they'll strike your softest part. Calder could feel the old weight pressing on his bones. The iron barrel, the warm snap of gunpowder, the silence that came after. One night, Clara found Calder's revolver missing from its shelf. She'd hidden it under loose floorboards near the cradle, hands trembling the whole time. She wasn't sure what scared her more, Merritt's grin in the trees, or the thought that Calder might pick up that gun and slip back into being just a weapon. In this place, violence grew like wild brush if you didn't pull it up by the root. So she waited. So did Merritt. And Calder Ash, once a man of music, now half ghost, half guardian, stood in the doorway each dusk, watching that tree line, wondering which would kill him first, the stranger or the man he used to be. They came at dawn, boots crunching through the frozen drifts like wolves testing the door of a chicken coop. Clara heard them first, the faint stomp of hooves out by the ridgeline, the distant echo of Merritt Kane's lazy whistle. She pressed Reed close to her chest, her breath catching in the hollow of her throat. Calder was already standing at the window, eyes narrowed, hand resting on the sill where the revolver used to be. Silas Thorne rode at the front, his coat dark against the white, a wide grin carved into his face like a mask made of ice. Two hired guns flanked him, eyes hidden under low brims, rifles strapped across their saddles. Merritt Kane lingered a few paces back, one boot tapping the stirrup, his smirk flickering when Calder stepped outside. Calder's shadow fell long across the clearing. He carried the old shotgun, sawed short for close work. No words passed at first. The wind hissed through the pine boughs. Clara crouched behind the doorframe, Reed asleep in her shawl, heart rattling against her ribs like a warning. Silas tilted his head. Ain't this sweet? The ghost and the whore, playing house like the snow won't bury 'em, same as the rest. Calder didn't flinch. His voice came low, steady. Turn around, Silas. Take your dogs with you. Silas laughed, a sound that scraped the air raw. She's mine, Ash. So's that brat she keeps breathing life into. You really think you can stop what's coming? The first shot cracked before the threat could finish rotting in the cold. Calder fired, dropping one of Silas's men clean from his saddle. The other shouted, fumbling his rifle. But Calder was moving already, a blur against the white. Gunfire ripped through the clearing, bits of pine and ice shattering like glass. Clara ducked lower, every shot like a hammer against her spine. Silas took cover behind a drift, yelling curses at Merritt. The bounty hunter hovered at the edge of the fight, hand near his pistol but never drawing it. A snake too clever to bite when the wolves were busy. He'd sold them out for a cut of the gold. Now he just needed to stay alive long enough to claim it. Calder reloaded behind a fallen log, blood dripping down his side where a bullet had grazed him. Clara saw him stagger, saw the old fear slip across his face. Not fear of dying, but fear of what would happen if he didn't stand up again. Then another gun barked, but not Calder's. Clara stood in the doorway, hands shaking around the revolver she'd hidden days before. She fired once, missed wide. The second shot found its mark, tearing through the throat of the man who'd crept too close to the cabin's flank. For a heartbeat, everything went silent, except the ragged pull of her breath. Behind the man's body, Clara saw a flicker of motion. An old woman half buried in the snow, eyes wide, clothes torn to rags. Calder had found her wandering the tree line the night before, delirious from the storm, and hidden her behind the shed while he figured how to help her south. Now Clara's bullet had bought the old woman a dawn she'd never have seen. Silas roared, scrambling for his rifle. Calder rose behind the log, the shotgun slipping from his grasp. He lunged forward, tackling Silas into the drift. They rolled fists and elbows, breath steaming in the frigid air. Merritt's horse wheeled behind them, hooves churning up powder as he turned to run. His eyes met Clara's for one long second, a promise that this wasn't finished, before he spurred the animal hard, leaving tracks that snaked down the ridge like a trail of spilled secrets. The clearing fell still. Silas lay half buried, Calder's hands wrapped tight around his throat. It would be so easy to squeeze, to finish the nightmare here and now. But Calder let him go, pushed himself up, blood soaking his coat. Inside the cabin, Clara lowered the revolver. Her hands still trembled, but her voice did not. When Calder stumbled through the door, she caught him before he fell, her cheek pressed to his shoulder. Outside, the old woman, the traveler Clara's bullet had saved, whispered a prayer into the wind. Her breath curled around the stain of red spreading through the snow, a small miracle in the middle of so much blood. She was proof that even in these frozen hills, one act of courage could carry someone further than fear ever would. And somewhere beyond the tree line, Merritt Kane rode alone, but not unseen, leaving a trail for the justice that was coming for him too. They rode into town just before the last snows melted, mud swallowing the wagon wheels halfway to the courthouse steps. Clara carried Reed wrapped in Calder's patch coat. His tiny hands clutched at her collar like roots clinging to thawing earth. Calder walked beside them, the brim of his old hat pulled low, shoulders stiff from a wound that hadn't healed right, and from the looks that cut deeper than any bullet ever could. Word had spread before they arrived. The town square buzzed like hornets. Folks pressed shoulder to shoulder for a chance to see Silas Thorne dragged through the door in shackles, his once sharp grin now just a sneer half buried behind a split lip. Merritt Kane's name was on every tongue too. Gone, but not gone far enough. His betrayal had left tracks Calder knew he'd be following for miles yet. Inside the courthouse, Clara stood straight-backed under the crossbeams, her voice raw but steady as she spoke of frozen graves hidden beneath the pines, of mothers and babies turned into collateral for gold they never touched. She named names. Men in the crowd flinched when she spoke. Some wept. Some couldn't meet her eyes at all. When her hands shook, she kept one on Reed's shoulder. When her throat closed up, she forced each word out anyway, as if by saying the horror aloud she could bury it for good. When they called Calder Ash to stand, a hush spread through the room like a winter hush after the last shot's echo dies. He felt it. Every gaze that still saw him as a ghost with a pistol for a spine. A bounty man who once traded names for coin. Never mind who got buried along the way. An old woman spat at his boots as he passed. He did not look away. At the stand, he didn't pretend. "I can't undo what I did," he said, voice like gravel under a slow wagon wheel. "But I can't run from it anymore either. If truth's got a price, I'm here to pay it." A man rose in the back, eyes red-rimmed, and asked Calder if he remembered a boy named Thomas, the boy who didn't come back from the Dakota run. Calder's jaw tensed, eyes dropping to the floorboards. "I remember every one of them," he said. "I'll carry him until this body gives out." The judge, an old territorial man with frost-white hair, leaned forward, weighing the silence. "You could hang," he said flatly, "or you could vanish. But we've got enough ghosts in these hills." He tapped the gavel once. "You'll stay. You'll serve this territory. Track the monsters still breathing out there. Protect what's left." Calder just nodded. No victory, no relief. Just a chance to put his boots where they might mean something more than blood. Months passed, and Clara made a home where music might live again. She rented a drafty old hall near the depot, the kind where the wind sang through the floorboards. She pinned a sign to the door. Wildflower School for Orphaned Children. She taught them old hymns, showed them how fingers could coax something gentle from battered keys. On quiet days, Calder would sit in the back row, whittling scraps of cedar into tiny animals for the children to paint. When Reed turned 2, Clara signed his name in the county ledger, Reed Ash, a name earned in snow and kept in firelight. On the first spring thaw, Clara stood on the schoolhouse porch, watching Calder saddle up for the high trails. He'd ride with the marshals now, hunting men who'd forgotten there were other ways to live. She placed her hand on his, scarred, calloused, once made for keys. She didn't ask him to stay. She only whispered, "Come home when you can." Some debts don't vanish. Some ghosts don't leave you. But forgiveness, real forgiveness, doesn't wipe away the scars. It plants them in good ground, where they can bloom into something worth carrying. And in the hush before dawn, when the pines bend under fresh snow, Clara's voice drifts through town like an old hymn. A promise that even the worst winters break, and even the coldest hands can remember how to play. Some chords linger long after the snow melts, like an old melody drifting through an empty cabin. Calder Ash's Road reminds us that forgiveness is never about erasing the past. It's about facing it, scar by scar, and deciding to carry it differently. He was a man who spent years running from ghosts he made himself. But even in a world as harsh as the frontier, he found a way to turn regret into something worth protecting. Maybe that's a lesson we need today more than ever. Most of us won't ever stand in a courtroom confessing every wrong we've done, or stand guard at a lonely cabin in the woods. But we all hold things we wish we could bury. Mistakes, old hurts, chances we didn't take. Maybe forgiveness in the world we live in now is learning how to tell the truth about our scars and let them bloom into something better. For our children, our neighbors, or even strangers who need a warm place to rest. Do you think Calder made the right choice? Would you have trusted him if you were in Clara's shoes? Or would you have turned him away, afraid that a man once made for killing could never learn to heal? Stories like this remind us that redemption doesn't ride in with gunfire and gold. Sometimes it's just a quiet promise to keep standing, keep loving, keep doing better, no matter what the past whispers. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own stories of forgiveness in the comments. What does second chance mean to you? Do you believe people can truly change? Thank you for giving your time tonight to listen around this virtual campfire. If this story brought you hope or made you remember someone who deserves another chance, please give this video a like, share it with someone you trust, and subscribe so you never miss a ride with us again. Stay warm, keep your own fire burning bright, and remember, even the coldest hands can learn to play again. See you on the next trail.